G'day everybody and welcome back. Okay, so I've cleaned the head up, and this was a result. I attacked the chambers and the ports with a wire brush on a drill, and then I soda blasted them. Now, soda blasting is non-abrasive, so you're not going to pit all your valve seats, etc. You won't get as good a job as you will with, say, wet sand blasting or glass bead blasting, but they can affect your seats. I've had a quick look and they look pretty good. I've also cleaned up the valves on the wire buff. They're looking fairly reasonable as well. So what I'm going to try and do now is lap them in and see if they'll produce a good seat. But before I do that, I might just have a quick talk about what a good seat looks like. So the valve seats that are in this motorcycle, and indeed most modern engines, are what they call a 3-angle seat. So there's an angle at the top, and then there's the angle where the valve actually mates, and then there's another angle that leads into the throat. And if you can imagine, this is a cross-sectional view of the valve seat. It's pressed into the cylinder head, so of course you'd have another one on this side. Now the valve, as I stated, seats on that particular face there. So there's a ground surface on the valve that matches that angle, and then often the valve will then come radius around down to the shaft, and of course that's the top of the valve there. So when you're looking at valves, there's a few things that you need to watch out for. You want to look out for valve regression, which is where the valve actually starts to bury itself into the head. This is caused by wear, generally on the face of the valve, because these are quite hard, these valve seats, compared to the valve. When I used to work for an engine reco mob, we used to do LPG engines, make them out of old leaded 6-cylinder Holden motors for cement mixers, and we used to fit Brunel bronze guides and used to core out the cast iron seats and fit some nitrile hardened seats and Stellite valves, etc. But in a normal engine, the valve will often wear quite quickly, and they get a concave wear in that mating surface, and allows the thing to come down, and this gets wider and wider and wider as it wears. So if the valves are still sitting proud, and when you've had a good look at the valve surface, when I was panning across the valve in the head in the last video, saying, oh, they look like they've been sealing all right, after I watched the video back, it was jumping off the page at me exactly where the valves were leaking, and you can see them here quite clearly, but obviously under the light that I was using I didn't pick that up. But anyway, so now a normal engine manufacturer is going to give you a valve seat that is a couple of millimeters wide, and what that does is it provides a good surface area for it to match up against, and allows the engine to run for many kilometers without significant wear, because you've got a lot more surface area across the face where you're sealing. If you were building a high performance engine, you would narrow that seat right up, because all the magic happens in your cylinder head. Pistons and cylinders just go up and down, and with exception to things like bore versus stroke ratios and the top of the piston and expansion rates, and people who build high performance engines or forced induction engines may even drill the ring lands on them to try and keep all that compression in the top, but the bottom end is essentially what it is. All the magic happens in the cylinder head. That's where all your horsepower comes from. So any significant changes that you want to make, that's where you should be concentrating your effort. Sure, nothing beats cubic inches, and a big bore kit will certainly help. But all the flow, all the horsepower flow in and out, it comes out of your cylinder head. So back to the story. If you are building a high performance engine, when I used to build high performance engines for a company, we used to try and aim for a very thin valve face, so maybe 0.5 millimetre to 1 millimetre wide. That's all. And we would always position, because of you want to get your flow and maximise the amount of run time that you can get out of your engine. We used to aim for about the middle of the face on the inlet valve for the seating, for the valve seat contact patch. But on the exhaust valve, we used to take it right down to the heel without actually coming off the valve, obviously. So yeah, what we're looking for on our engine is a nice positive contact patch, a couple of millimetres wide. We haven't buried the valve into it, and that it's sealing all the way around. Trusty torch, the one you've seen me drop 1,000 times. This poor old torch has had flashlight, has had more hits than Shirley Bassey. Right, down in that hole is the valve stem seals, and I'm just going to remove those before I do this job. I've got to replace them anyway because they're a likely source of oil ingress at this stage. Now they're difficult to get to because they're down in that hole. You can use an old screwdriver and sort of bend the tip of it over or something, but I've got a special tool for removing them. Okay, this is the tool. They're designed to be able to just pop down into there, get a really good grip of it, and pull it out. And the good news, at least, is that these are as hard as a cat's head, so they're most likely why I was getting some oil in. I've got a suspicion though that number 4 cylinder compression was that bad that it's going to have issues with the rings. Because I get a bit silly in my old age, I'm going to number these so I don't muck it up. Right, that's cylinder number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Inlet valve number 1. What I'm looking for here is excessive wear in the valve guide, and it feels pretty good. Alright, so I want a little tub of water, a valve lapping stick, and valve lapping paste. This particular one has 2 grades. It has a coarse grade on that end and a fine grade on that end, so we'll start with the coarse. It's like jelly. Just wipe it around the valve. Be frightened to put a little bit on there. It's useless unless it's on that mounting face. As I lift it, I'm turning the valve and putting it back in a new position. You want to put some weight on it. Let's have a look at him. You should be able to see where it's contacting, and more importantly if it's not contacting. You get a nice dull, let's see if I can show you. like a dull line and then a dark line above it and then a dark line below it. So where we're looking is, I'm going to point on it, this will do. Right there is the seat, and then you can see the darker part of the insert below it, and then right up at the top. And we've got good contact all the way around. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna do it with a bit of a fine lapping paste to finish it off, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. And now I need to do that to all of the other valves. Alright, so what I'm looking for here is the important part about these head gaskets is this sealing ring and where it mates around the combustion chamber. They're pretty forgiving. The rest of it's just sort of keeping oil and muck and crap and adding extra security to the head gasket. But all the head gasket needs is a flat surface and with a little bit of it doesn't want to be mirror finish smooth because the head gasket has to bite into something, so you've got to give it a little bit of a surface. So just by dressing it up with a flat file wrapped in some wet and dry paper, I think I've got a good enough surface now. We're just about ready to, I'm just looking at where it seals, and the important part where it actually makes contact around the combustion chamber is good, and I mean these rings compress to help make that seal anyway, so I'm reasonably happy with that. So it's time now to give this a wash and reassemble it. A clean cylinder head. Okay, so everything's been scrubbed and washed down in degreaser and water and then blown dry with air, and then to stop it all flash rusting I've coated everything with a bit of dewatering fluid, and it's now time to put it together. So the first job I need to do is fit some new valve guide seals. Typical XS1100 community. Pete Pendlebury, thank you very much, sent me some seals and some other gaskets that I needed, and I do appreciate that. I've said it before, I don't ask for handouts, but you know, you guys rock. You save me heaps. Right, now the valve guide removal tool that I came with also comes with a set of insertion tools. Valve guide seal removal tool. So all I really need to do is pop this guy down in here where he's got to live. Try not to cock it up. Hey presto, Brian. Haven't heard that for a while. So now we have a new valve guide seal fitted snugly down in there, and I just need to do that now to all of the others. Key to success here is making sure that you start these square and they're not, put them in with your fingers and get them actually started square. You don't want to have them cock over and then start hammering it. Now if you don't have the proper tool for the job, you can use a socket and an extension. But you just want to be sure that the socket is big enough to clear this rubber and spring, because if it's too tight you'll damage that and then it'll just leak straight away. Okie dokie, we now have a new set of valve guide seals fitted. It's time now to start thinking about throwing some valves in the thing. Alright, cylinder 1, cylinder 2, cylinder 3, cylinder 4. So I'm going to lay everything out here, ready to go. Cylinder 4, cylinder 3, cylinder 2, cylinder 1, exhaust valves. These are all the parts for the exhaust valves. Everything in there. Pot of oil, just with standard motor oil in it. I've pushed all the. I didn't know what oil was in this, so I emptied it out and put the Yamaha lube in there. Squirt a bit down the guides. Right, on the seats. Slide him in. Gently pop him through the valve guide seal. And that one's in. I'm doing by tapping them back and forth, making sure the valves don't stick. Right. Always keep a clean rag at hand, and no Yankee Doodle, this is not our old curtains. Right. Out of spring. Out of spring. Valve cap. This is where the fun begins, trying to get these collets in successfully. I've got a lot going on in my way here. Can't get my fingers in there, that's for sure. Alright, what I did there, that was successful. I managed to get the collet into the groove, and I've twisted him around to the bottom because it's easier to get it in the top. So I'll just try and get the other one in there. He's sort of sitting in position. Yep. And just wind this guy back out. Beautiful. Just the same as I did when I disassembled it. Just give it a couple of pops with pin punch, just to make sure there's one valve in. 7 to go. Lovely. And there we have it. So all of our valves they're still sitting nice and proud. We don't have any valve regress. I reckon I picked this up just in time, because what can happen is obviously you get a lot of carbon build up and oil and crap up around the throats, and the valves will sometimes not quite seat properly, and then gas can escape between the seat and the valve and start to burn them out. And I think I was fortunate enough. I think I've actually just picked this up in time. So they're all clean, as I said. they've all been relapped back in, they're all sealing, and it's all back together now. But we need to put some buckets in it, so I'll do that. They're still in their marked containers, so I'll pop them in now. The biggest difference between doing these commercially and doing them in your garage is the cleaning. When you do them commercially, you've got acid baths and bead blasters, and everything comes back absolutely spotless, because cleanliness is next to godliness when it comes to engine reassembly. But do the best you can with what you've got. And hey presto, we have one cylinder head ready to go back on the bike. So what have we got? We had a couple of leaking valves. Probably caught them in the nick of time before they really started to burn out the seats. What does a burnt out valve look like? This is an exhaust valve out of a Clyde diesel, out of a train, Queensland Railways. And you can see quite clearly here where it's eaten out the exhaust, so that's a burnt out valve. That's where the gas has got very hot there and burnt away part of the sealing surface of the valve, and also there's some evidence of it tracking here. Yep, but we managed to avoid that, and so they're all lapped back in, they're all clean, they've got brand new valve guide seals which will help with the oil burning, because it would have been pulling down through those seals, and it's ready to throw on the bike and set the head up. But first of all, we've got to do the barrels. I've got to go away for a week next week, going up to Queensland for my daughter's 21st birthday. I'll enjoy that. So that's why I've wrapped the head in Glad Wrap. I've sprayed it all with CRC just to prevent any flash rusting, and wrap the thing in Glad Wrap to keep the dust out, and that can be put aside now. And when I get back, so probably another 2 weeks from now, I'll attack the barrels, and we'll get it all back together again. All right, well, thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned. Be sure to come back and subscribe, and don't forget to like, and I'll catch you next time on Basket Case. And take the cams out. Alright, before we go any further, and before I disconnect the battery, I just want to do a compression test on each of the cylinders to see whether or not there's any obvious issues.